I build prop weapons for a living, but the algorithm won't let me. Thanks, Mila Jovovich!
This video actually had funding for new materials, so for this build, you'll need balsa wood blocks, balsa wood triangles, scrap MDF, wood glue, paint, wax paper, epoxy resin, UV powder, UV lights, DAP Alex Fast Dry, red putty, safety gear, and these prop making tools. Well, I don't really need all of them, but they'd certainly help. Scissors, razor, pens, box cutter. I've relapsed, guys.
First, I'm gonna make a template using this poster board. I don't know, I got it out of trash outside Staples. It looks like this sword is half a mila tall, so I'm gonna try and replicate that. That's the unit of measurement. That's the unit of measurement that I have to use because this is not inches. I don't know what the hell this is, but this is designed to mess people up. So when I make this template available to you on Etsy later, link below, I'm gonna have to flip it over and redo all my annotation. Also, there's just no way that I'm gonna get the scale right. I say like half a mila tall, but the reality is my internal measurement scale has every single human being at exactly 6 feet tall. I'm not even 6 feet tall, but that's just what my brain does. I don't know what kind of deprogramming it's gonna take to get that out of my brain.
After I was finished ranting, I cut that out with scissors. Now I have to turn this into a translucent glowing blade, so I'm gonna need to make a mold. You're supposed to do this with silicone, but a trial unit of silicone is $40, and I can already tell that this is more than a trial unit's volume, which, you know, I don't have anyway. What I do have, however, is scrap wood, and plenty of it.
This is relatively flat, but I don't want to pour directly onto here because, well, it'll glue it to the platform. So I gotta take some wax paper. No idea why I said it like that. I'll lay it down.
I cut off the excess, but I tried to stay at least 1/8 of an inch outside of the trace line for a margin of error. Next, I put down wood glue around it, which will be to secure the mold walls.
I'll essentially be finding the statue in a slab of granite. And what I'm doing is attempting to preemptively make that slab of granite as small as possible, like as close to the final output as I possibly can. Actually, that could very easily snap that blade straight back into my eyes. Safety tip, razor blades are magnetically attracted to eyes. Always wear eye protection.
Balsa wood is insanely easy to cut, but at the same time, you never want to take any chances in terms of safety, so yeah, use a short blade, not the entire thing extended like I would normally do for EVA foam. I glued a wooden outline to the plank, filling in the curved areas with essentially trash, just scrap offcuts. I used sloped shapes to create the slope on the inside. And then I did a poor man's waterproofing with hot glue. Now, if I were to pour the resin in right now, it would glue to the wooden walls. So I have to create a wax barrier between the wood and the resin in addition to the wax paper on the bottom. I mean, that's the largest surface area, but still. Take like 5 minutes and save me 5 hours of sanding. Because I don't like sand. I'm both literally and figuratively playing with fire here.
William Jakespeare Props does not advocate that you ever play with fire ever. This is gonna be kind of tricky because that cardboard so easily go up in smoke. Alright. Safety tip, if there's smoke, there's fire. It's technically still burning, so don't like throw a recently blown out candle into a box of paper.
Next, I mixed up some resin.
My local store finally has new gloves in stock. Yay, I can stop putting poison on my hands. You'll notice I have backup mixing cups because I am 100% certain that any amount that I can get in this is not going to be the proper volume. I could measure it with rice, but yeah, that's food. I don't want to waste it. Support me on Patreon so I can eat something other than white rice.
I threw in a generous amount of orange UV powder, which you can find online. I'm hitting that with a black light while I'm mixing just to keep track of it because it tends to want to clump together, so you're really gonna mix it up. This is a delicate process that you really can't rush, so be sure to read the instructions first. What I do is I preheat the bottles of resin in a bucket of water, then I dry them off because you don't want the water to get in contact with the resin. Then I slowly mix it for a minute, transfer it back into the original cup, slowly mix it for a minute again. You want to do it slowly so there's no bubbles, then pour it back in the other cup and slowly mix it for 30 seconds. That usually works. I mean, it's never not worked since I've done that.
Okay, so you'll notice that it glows much brighter under the UV light and there don't appear to be any leaks.
Next, I made templates for the handle. I sort of shot myself in the foot on this one because I changed the shape of the blade edge when I made the mold, but both the blade and the mold will require significant sanding anyway before they will adapt to each other. So I'm trying not to get too bogged down in making a perfect match with zero tolerance.
All right, so this is a hot mess, but trust me, it makes sense. This marker's about to die. Come on, don't die, Sharpie. Don't die. Don't die on me.
I traced that template onto scrap wood.
All right, this is the cheapest wood possible because, once again, no budget. But if I cut it along the grain, then it will add a little bit of strength.
This is as good a time as any for the patron scroll, because it's a wide shot of my horrible workshop. I know a lot of people find these patron breaks annoying, but that's too bad. I'm never gonna stop thanking my patrons, and you should too, because they're responsible for all of the videos I've put out since 2016. I mean, except for the random companies that send me stuff, but random companies wouldn't send me stuff if I wasn't keeping up with the uploads, so it's mutually beneficial there. So many prop making channels have folded due to lack of funding, and the patrons are warriors who are staving that off, saving this channel every single month. I can't thank them enough. In particular this time, Paul, which in addition to his $1 pledge, did a one-time donation of $100, which I used on all the materials in this build, as well as bringing back the tools and materials list. People don't realize that takes a very long time to edit, and when there's not enough money, I'm sort of the mindset that time is better spent making the prop look better. It's because of him that we get this extra video this month, and the leftover materials will translate into making the future builds look better. Alright, looks like I'm done slicing that up on my saw. Once they were cut out, I refined them on my belt sander. I also had to cut an MDF core.
Okay, so notice that I didn't put the clove in this one, and that's because, well, I gotta make room for the blade. The blade's gotta go in there and it needs to wedge up against it. Now I would like to just sandwich that in and glue it right there, but things will be 1,000 times easier for me later if I mark out the hole where the handle is going to go and cut this up now.
I glued that together with wood glue, and when it dried, cleaned it up on the belt sander.
This is all dried up, and I took it back to the belt sander and refined the exterior perimeter of it. But as you can see in the areas where, the rounded edge of a belt sander can't get into, I'm gonna have to go in with increasingly smaller diameter sanding drum bits with my rotary tool. However, that's MDF, which I may have explained before in this video is incredibly toxic, and the dust, ugh. So I think I'm gonna start with a coping saw just to try and get as much of that down as possible.
So now we're back to VO Jake, because dremeling is the least appealing audio in the universe, says the guy listening to early yes. I like it.
All right, that's pretty good. These are not quite symmetrical, but they're more just structural. So I'm not going to take a ton of time to get those totally flush because they'll be covered up.
Next, I cut a notch in the guard for the handle to go into. Now I am at times sawing into MDF, which gives off toxic dust. So where's my mask?
Activate auxiliary mask. Isn't it pretty?
Wow, there are so many spiders in here.
While all the structural load-bearing parts of this prop are going to be made out of wood, anything cosmetic or just for show is going to be made out of foam.
The disc sanding bit always seems to kick up more dust and smoke. I guess it's hotter. So yeah, the mask is a necessity here. I cut those pieces out with a razor pen. I don't know what it is, but I actually feel like the 1/2-inch thick EVA foam with the more intricate texture on the back, the floor mats, the puzzle piece floor mats. For some reason, those seem to cut better than the thinner tiles or any other EVA foam that I've used. Just a side tangent, maker thought. I want the handle attachment point to be as sturdy as possible, so I attached MDF pieces as a solid base to the foam details. Did that make sense? Also, while I was at it, I filled in the notch up there with scrap MDF and held it in place with a rubber band. The foam pieces were just hot glued on. There's a raised detail, so I made that out of thin craft foam, which you can get at any hobby shop, and I super glued those on. There's supposed to be more detail inside, but I can tell from the trailer it's obviously very intricate and doesn't show up clearly enough for me to know exactly what it is, so I think I'll wait until the movie comes out. There's a lot of ugly seams here, so I'm periodically going back and filling in those with layer after layer of white putty, which under ideal conditions takes 20 minutes to dry. Up here at this time of year it takes 2 hours, but still infinitely better than the 24-hour time limit on Quick Seal, which I still use, by the way, just on non-time sensitive projects.
I did a paint test right there, and although in a wide shot I don't think that wood grain will come through, I still want to try and fill it in. I picked up this red Bondo spot putty, which is Bondo with the accelerant, is that the word, already in it. So you just have to apply it and it dries. Thanks, Paul. So I'm going to use this to try and fill in some of that wood grain first, and luckily it has a dry time of about 20 minutes, so that shouldn't interfere with the painting process. Although, if you've ever used Bondo before, it's pretty horrific smelling, so probably means it's not something you want in your lungs. So I am going to put on my respirator mask and let voiceover Jake take over.
I learned about this years ago from Steve Neal, who uses it to fill in seams on starships and submarines. He also has a cameo at the beginning of Laser Blast, if anybody saw that, or more likely if anybody saw the MST3K for that.
It's supposed to have 72 hours at room temperature. It's had 60, but it's been in a warm room, so it should be fine. Famous last words. Yeah, so that is what it's going to be like every area where it contacted the wood. So I'm going to try not to manhandle it, because depending on how cured it is, it could either bend and then you've got a bent blade, or it could break and then there's going to be a very obvious crack in the blade. Hey, weren't you a carpenter?
Various chisels and picks to gently pry it just a little bit all the way around the perimeter, rather than going all at once from one end and potentially breaking it. Once I got it out of there, I peeled away the wax paper, which clung but didn't glue itself, thankfully, and then pried off all the balsa wood, which was very difficult. But I mainly used balsa because I knew that if I couldn't pry it off, it would be the easiest type of wood to sand away on the belt sander. Once I'm done chiseling off the larger pieces, I'll still have to finish off the splinters on my belt sander, but, you know, I'm clearly cutting out 95% of the work by hand.
Chisels to the rescue! See, balsa has like no sort of strength or endurance whatsoever, but a small amount of the resin will seep into the wood just by it being wood. I mean, this is technically supposed to be used to fill in cracks in wood.
I did a test fitting to make sure it'd work.
That is just not coming off. Hey, didn't you used to work on movies? See, I need them like the way they're welded together for to be used to hold flags or bounce boards. That's the only way that would have come off altogether like that. All right, the width is good, but because of the way I did the sloping, it's only quote unquote sharp from one side. So I'm gonna have to fix that up on the belt sander.
Now, in order for the build to be a success, you're gonna have to slaughter a rabbit and wrap your head in its pelt to please Hephaestus, god of craftsmanship.
It's very cold in here, guys. What I'm doing right now is taking the bits of balsa wood that are stuck in there out of there. It's not totally necessary on this edge because most of it's going to be covered up by that little bit of the handle. However, in order to get a feel for how the material is going to react to being sanded like this, I want to start on the seam that is least important if I mess up. Also, I'm periodically cleaning all the grit out of here. With this belt sander cleaner, because resin loves to get in those grooves and stay there.
This is being accomplished with ultraviolet light. I got the idea from another Mila Jovovich movie. What was it called again? Had the vampires. That'll come to me. Now, this is being accomplished using an old black light, which is extremely dangerous and unwieldy to have in your prop. So I'm gonna replace it. However, very useful for identifying bits of debris caught in here, like a little bit of wax is stuck in there too. Yeah, so that needs a teensy bit more refinement on the belt sander and my rotary tool for the places that are hard to get at. I'm noticing it's nearly an inch too high up there, which I was willing to live with, but it's exactly an inch too high up here. Not to mention, in there it's got to be sanded out.
To get the blade to line up, I sawed off the back with a coping saw. Notice I'm holding the blade in place with EVA foam offcuts. This loosens the vice's grip a bit, but also prevents the vice from scuffing the blade.
And that's left me with a little random glowing slab. Look at that, the barcode came off the wood. All right, let's do a test fitting. Nice. So this is almost perfect, maybe a millimeter that could come down. However, down here, clearly I messed up. Did a curve when I should have done a straight line. And additionally, this is not quite a straight line on the inside. There's a teeny tiny little slope that goes all the way down. And I can spend the next 5 hours in there with my files, just the movie props are all about, we need it right now! Get it done as fast as possible! 1.21 gigawatts! So what I'm gonna do instead, I'm gonna take this back to the belt sander and cut out, like that much. Cut out, sand off about that much. God, I am going through a whole box of Band-Aids just on these 2 cuts. And that'll be like 5 minutes as opposed to 5 hours. Moment of truth. Alright! Didn't quite line up at the bottom. I did have to cut off a little piece there, but that's fine. I'll just put in a shim. Nothing that's gonna make or break the project.
I cut the spade separately from the hilt just because it's easier. Also, they gotta be hollowed out for LEDs. And, well, yeah, it's easier to do that with foam.
I'm going to put a little tiny divot in each of these spades. Sure. Space for the LED. Careful as you do this because it's gonna want to act, well, like a wheel, you know? It's gonna try and drive across your piece. Oh, by the way, I made these white just so that they'd reflect back. They'd kick back more of the light on the inside, the part that's up against the inside. I'm gonna have to do the other 3 before I attach them because it'd be impossible to do that otherwise. Alright, now I'm going to attach each of these with super glue.
Once all those spades were in there, I painted it flat black because it's way easier to do this before the blade is in there. It took 2 coats because the foam absorbed the first one. I glued the blade into the hilts with some epoxy resin left over from making the blade. I felt that that would be the strongest glue to use, since it's meant to adhere to wood anyway. That will need to dry overnight at least. When it dried, I built the handle. I secured an ultraviolet flashlight into the notch with hot glue, and I wired oscillating UV LED lights under the spades for the fire effect.
Looking for this? Or the lead line container I probably should have left it in? Okay, I'm gonna come right out and say it. This is not the strongest thing in the world. It's hot glue. If I were to swing it a lot side to side like that, completely break off. Once this movie comes out and I know what the thing actually looks like in high def, I'm gonna find some way to reinforce this, probably with just a PVC pipe plug-in. But for now, I'm just gonna know not to swing it side to side and continue to reinforce the hell out of it.
Then I extended it with a cardboard sleeve. I covered that with faux leather, attached a generic semi-industrial pommel, which will hide the battery pack. I added this additional guard piece, reminiscent of a Fallout prop. Then I painted those parts. Did some really quick and dirty weathering.
This is how I have to let it dry. And oh, hey, secondary use for the glue gun stand.
And now I'm ready to hunt some monsters. Nah, I'd be the red shirt of that franchise. Still though, I would absolutely be a red shirt in a Jovovich Anderson movie. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you're interested in building one of these, there's a link to the template below. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon page. I'm hoping this build shows what I was able to do with the extra $100, you know, being that much more gas in the tank, so to speak. See, I'm thrilled that I have enough support to do any level of build at all, but I also know what I'm capable of, and I'd love to be building sci-fi vehicles at this point. So if you're out there, help me make crazy awesome vehicles. You're my only hope. All right, onward and upward. Happy crafting, everyone. See you later.